She finally heard footsteps, heavy, familiar, before the door swung open. Lucien entered, drenched from rain and battle drills, his shirt clinging to the lines of muscle beneath. His hair hung damp around his face, eyes darker than usual. "You're awake," he said, voice rough from sleeplessness. Ava crossed her arms. "Hard to sleep after you run away from a kiss like it was a sin." He looked at her sharply. "It was. Then why did you do it?" He hesitated, then took a step closer. "Because I forgot for one moment who I was." "And who are you?" she challenged. "A king, a coward?" He was suddenly right in front of her, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating off him. A man trying not to lose control. Her pulse spiked. "You already have." Lucien's jaw tightened. "You think this is easy? That I don't fight it every time I see you? Then stop fighting," she whispered. His breath caught, but he turned away, gripping the window frame like he needed it to stay standing. "You don't understand. There's a law older than both of us, Ava. If I claim you, the bond becomes absolute. It binds not just us, but our bloodlines. The curse would wake fully. Maybe that's what's supposed to happen." He turned, eyes blazing. "You don't get it. The last time the Lunara bloodline bound to an alpha king, the moon fell dark for a century. Packs tore each other apart. The goddess herself had to intervene." Ava stared at him, unflinching. "And still she gave me this blood. Doesn't that mean something?" Lucien stepped closer again, slow and dangerous. "It means she's testing me." "No, Lucien," Ava said, her voice trembling but sure. "She's testing us." Their gazes locked, power clashing, hearts burning. The silence between them pulsed, alive and dangerous. And then Lucien flinched. A faint glow rippled under his skin. Veins of gold light crawling up his throat, over his arms like molten fire. "Lucien?" Ava whispered. He staggered, gripping the wall. His eyes flashed between gold and black, his voice breaking. "The curse. It's reacting." Ava reached for him, but he shoved her back, snarling. "Stay away!" His wolf was breaking through. Not the calm, controlled alpha she'd seen before, but something feral and ancient. Lucien dropped to one knee, gasping. The air around him thickened, rippling with heat and energy. His claws lengthened, his teeth bared. Ava ignored his warning and ran to him, pressing her palms to his chest. "Lucien, look at me!" His gaze snapped up on wild glowing gold. "You're not my enemy," she said firmly. "You're fighting me, fighting us, but we're the same." "You said it yourself," he growled, the sound guttural and broken. "Lucien!" she shouted, her wolf rising with hers, glowing faintly white. "I'm not afraid of your darkness." Her pendant flared, light bursting through the room like moonfire. The golden veins on his skin began to fade, the air settling. Slowly, painfully, Lucien's breathing steadied. When he looked at her again, his eyes were only human, and full of something she couldn't name. He caught her wrist, pulling her against him, foreheads pressed together. Both trembling, Ava whispered, "You see? You're not the monster you think you are." Lucien's voice was rough. "You make it sound easy." "It could be," he exhaled shakily. "You don't know what it's like to fight yourself every second of the day. To want something so badly, knowing it will destroy everything you've built." Ava's fingers brushed the scar along his jaw. "Maybe some things are worth the ruin." Lucien's throat worked as he swallowed hard. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I might believe you." For a long moment, they didn't move. Outside thunder rumbled again, softer this time, not a warning, but a reminder. Finally, Lucien released her hand, stepping back, eyes still on her. "We'll continue training tomorrow. You need to learn to control your wolf completely." Ava tilted her head. "So we're pretending that didn't happen?" His lips curved, not a smile, but close. "If pretending keeps you alive, then yes." She sighed, half amused, half furious. "You're impossible." Lucien turned toward the door, his voice low. "And you're dangerous." When he was gone, Ava sank onto the bed, exhaling shakily. Her pulse still raced from his touch. The pendant at her neck flickered again, a faint heartbeat of light. This time, a whisper echoed faintly in her mind, a voice that wasn't her own. "The bond is waking." She clutched the pendant tight, eyes wide. Somewhere in the castle, Lucien stopped mid-stride, his hand pressed against his chest, feeling the same pulse. Whatever bound them was no longer sleeping, and neither of them could ignore it much longer. The night settled heavy over the kingdom, and the air felt charged with something unseen, like the calm before a storm that knew exactly where to strike. Ava couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, Lucien, half man, half monster, breaking apart under the curse that her blood had awakened. Every time she breathed, she could still smell him. Smoke, rain, and the quiet ache of someone who'd lived too long with ghosts. She pressed her palm against the pendant resting on her chest, feeling it pulse faintly against her skin. It wasn't just a charm anymore. It was alive, tethered to something far greater and far more dangerous than either of them understood. She rose from the bed, her bare feet silent against the cold stone floor. Outside the window, the moon was caught behind drifting clouds, bleeding silver light through the cracks. Somewhere deep in the castle, she could hear low voices, urgent, angry. The council. Her pulse quickened. She wrapped a cloak around herself and stepped into the corridor. Down the spiral stairs, past the torches burning low, she moved like a shadow, keeping to the edges until she reached the council chamber. The door stood ajar. Through the slit, she saw them. 4 elders of the High Council, cloaked in black and silver, standing before Lucien. He looked worn, his jaw tight, his hands clasped behind his back like a man chained by duty. "She is a threat," one of the elders hissed. "The prophecy warned us. The white wolf awakens, the bond corrupts the bloodline. If you will not kill her, we will." Lucien's voice was calm, but the weight in it could break mountains. "You will not touch her. Then you choose her over your crown." Another snapped. "Over your kingdom?" "I choose to keep my word," he said quietly. "Her mother died to protect this realm. I will not repeat that sin." "Protect?" The eldest scoffed. "You've cursed us all by bringing her here. The magic is stirring, Lucien. The moon seal trembles and we can feel it in the earth. You felt it too, haven't you?" Lucien's silence was answer enough. "She must die before the next full moon," the elder continued, his tone cold. "Or you both will." Ava's hand gripped the doorframe so tightly her knuckles turned white. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear before they made good on that threat. But another voice whispered inside her, calm and certain, "No more running." Lucien stepped closer to the elders, his power radiating like heat. "If any of you raise a hand against her, you raise it against your king." The words echoed through the chamber like thunder. The elders faltered, but their eyes burned with quiet fury. "Then may the goddess have mercy on you both," one of them said before they turned and left, robes sweeping like shadows retreating from light. When they were gone, Lucien stood still for a long time, breathing hard, his hands shaking. Ava pushed open the door. "You heard?" he said without turning. "I did," she admitted. "You shouldn't have defied them." He finally looked at her, eyes dark and blazing. "Shouldn't I? They would have you executed, and I'm supposed to let them." "You're risking everything," she whispered. "Your title, your kingdom. And you think I care about that anymore?" Ava's heart stuttered. "You should." Lucien took a slow step toward her. "What I care about, Ava, is you alive." The silence stretched between them, fragile and burning. She swallowed, trying to steady her voice. "You can't save me from what's already in my blood." "Maybe not," he said softly. "But I can stand between you and those who'd see you bleed for it." He reached out, fingers brushing her jaw, and she froze, not in fear, but because every nerve in her body went still, waiting. His thumb traced her cheekbone, slow, reverent. "Do you know what it's like to crave something you know you can never have?" She met his gaze. "I think we both do." The corner of his mouth curved, but there was no joy in it. "When I was younger, I thought strength meant never bending, never needing anyone. But you," his voice faltered, "you make me question everything I've ever believed." Ava's breath came unsteady. "Then stop questioning. Just feel." He closed his eyes, jaw clenched as if the war inside him was tearing him apart. "If I give in, Ava, there's no going back. The curse will bind us. You'll bear its weight as much as I do." "Maybe it was always meant to be ours," she said softly. "Not hers, ours." Lucien opened his eyes and they glowed faint gold again, not from fury, but from something deeper. He lifted a hand and rested it against her neck, feeling the frantic rhythm of her pulse beneath his thumb. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You shouldn't tempt me." "And yet you're here," she breathed. Their lips met again, slower this time, but no less dangerous. The kiss wasn't the rush of the first, it was a claiming, a confession of everything they'd tried to bury. The storm outside mirrored the one in them, thunder rolling through the night like the pulse of the earth itself. He kissed her until she forgot where she ended and he began. When they parted, the room seemed smaller, the air electric. Lucien rested his forehead against hers, his voice rough. She finally heard footsteps, heavy, familiar, before the door swung open. Lucien entered, drenched from rain and battle drills, his shirt clinging to the lines of muscle beneath. His hair hung damp around his face, eyes darker than usual. "You're awake," he said, voice rough from sleeplessness. Ava crossed her arms. "Hard to sleep after you run away from a kiss like it was a sin." He looked at her sharply. "It was. Then why did you do it?" He hesitated, then took a step closer. "Because I forgot for one moment who I was." "And who are you?" she challenged. "A king, a coward?" He was suddenly right in front of her, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating off him. A man trying not to lose control. Her pulse spiked. "You already have." Lucien's jaw tightened. "You think this is easy? That I don't fight it every time I see you? Then stop fighting," she whispered. His breath caught, but he turned away, gripping the window frame like he needed it to stay standing. "You don't understand. There's a law older than both of us, Ava. If I claim you, the bond becomes absolute. It binds not just us, but our bloodlines. The curse would wake fully. Maybe that's what's supposed to happen." He turned, eyes blazing. "You don't get it. The last time the Lunara bloodline bound to an alpha king, the moon fell dark for a century. Packs tore each other apart. The goddess herself had to intervene." Ava stared at him, unflinching. "And still she gave me this blood. Doesn't that mean something?" Lucien stepped closer again, slow and dangerous. "It means she's testing me." "No, Lucien," Ava said, her voice trembling but sure. "She's testing us." Their gazes locked, power clashing, hearts burning. The silence between them pulsed, alive and dangerous. And then Lucien flinched. A faint glow rippled under his skin. Veins of gold light crawling up his throat, over his arms like molten fire. "Lucien?" Ava whispered. He staggered, gripping the wall. His eyes flashed between gold and black, his voice breaking. "The curse. It's reacting." Ava reached for him, but he shoved her back, snarling. "Stay away!" His wolf was breaking through. Not the calm, controlled alpha she'd seen before, but something feral and ancient. Lucien dropped to one knee, gasping. The air around him thickened, rippling with heat and energy. His claws lengthened, his teeth bared. Ava ignored his warning and ran to him, pressing her palms to his chest. "Lucien, look at me!" His gaze snapped up on wild glowing gold. "You're not my enemy," she said firmly. "You're fighting me, fighting us, but we're the same." "You said it yourself," he growled, the sound guttural and broken. "Lucien!" she shouted, her wolf rising with hers, glowing faintly white. "I'm not afraid of your darkness." Her pendant flared, light bursting through the room like moonfire. The golden veins on his skin began to fade, the air settling. Slowly, painfully, Lucien's breathing steadied. When he looked at her again, his eyes were only human, and full of something she couldn't name. He caught her wrist, pulling her against him, foreheads pressed together. Both trembling, Ava whispered, "You see? You're not the monster you think you are." Lucien's voice was rough. "You make it sound easy." "It could be," he exhaled shakily. "You don't know what it's like to fight yourself every second of the day. To want something so badly, knowing it will destroy everything you've built." Ava's fingers brushed the scar along his jaw. "Maybe some things are worth the ruin." Lucien's throat worked as he swallowed hard. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I might believe you." For a long moment, they didn't move. Outside thunder rumbled again, softer this time, not a warning, but a reminder. Finally, Lucien released her hand, stepping back, eyes still on her. "We'll continue training tomorrow. You need to learn to control your wolf completely." Ava tilted her head. "So we're pretending that didn't happen?" His lips curved, not a smile, but close. "If pretending keeps you alive, then yes." She sighed, half amused, half furious. "You're impossible." Lucien turned toward the door, his voice low. "And you're dangerous." When he was gone, Ava sank onto the bed, exhaling shakily. Her pulse still raced from his touch. The pendant at her neck flickered again, a faint heartbeat of light. This time, a whisper echoed faintly in her mind, a voice that wasn't her own. "The bond is waking." She clutched the pendant tight, eyes wide. Somewhere in the castle, Lucien stopped mid-stride, his hand pressed against his chest, feeling the same pulse. Whatever bound them was no longer sleeping, and neither of them could ignore it much longer. The night settled heavy over the kingdom, and the air felt charged with something unseen, like the calm before a storm that knew exactly where to strike. Ava couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, Lucien, half man, half monster, breaking apart under the curse that her blood had awakened. Every time she breathed, she could still smell him. Smoke, rain, and the quiet ache of someone who'd lived too long with ghosts. She pressed her palm against the pendant resting on her chest, feeling it pulse faintly against her skin. It wasn't just a charm anymore. It was alive, tethered to something far greater and far more dangerous than either of them understood. She rose from the bed, her bare feet silent against the cold stone floor. Outside the window, the moon was caught behind drifting clouds, bleeding silver light through the cracks. Somewhere deep in the castle, she could hear low voices, urgent, angry. The council. Her pulse quickened. She wrapped a cloak around herself and stepped into the corridor. Down the spiral stairs, past the torches burning low, she moved like a shadow, keeping to the edges until she reached the council chamber. The door stood ajar. Through the slit, she saw them. 4 elders of the High Council, cloaked in black and silver, standing before Lucien. He looked worn, his jaw tight, his hands clasped behind his back like a man chained by duty. "She is a threat," one of the elders hissed. "The prophecy warned us. The white wolf awakens, the bond corrupts the bloodline. If you will not kill her, we will." Lucien's voice was calm, but the weight in it could break mountains. "You will not touch her. Then you choose her over your crown." Another snapped. "Over your kingdom?" "I choose to keep my word," he said quietly. "Her mother died to protect this realm. I will not repeat that sin." "Protect?" The eldest scoffed. "You've cursed us all by bringing her here. The magic is stirring, Lucien. The moon seal trembles and we can feel it in the earth. You felt it too, haven't you?" Lucien's silence was answer enough. "She must die before the next full moon," the elder continued, his tone cold. "Or you both will." Ava's hand gripped the doorframe so tightly her knuckles turned white. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear before they made good on that threat. But another voice whispered inside her, calm and certain, "No more running." Lucien stepped closer to the elders, his power radiating like heat. "If any of you raise a hand against her, you raise it against your king." The words echoed through the chamber like thunder. The elders faltered, but their eyes burned with quiet fury. "Then may the goddess have mercy on you both," one of them said before they turned and left, robes sweeping like shadows retreating from light. When they were gone, Lucien stood still for a long time, breathing hard, his hands shaking. Ava pushed open the door. "You heard?" he said without turning. "I did," she admitted. "You shouldn't have defied them." He finally looked at her, eyes dark and blazing. "Shouldn't I? They would have you executed, and I'm supposed to let them." "You're risking everything," she whispered. "Your title, your kingdom. And you think I care about that anymore?" Ava's heart stuttered. "You should." Lucien took a slow step toward her. "What I care about, Ava, is you alive." The silence stretched between them, fragile and burning. She swallowed, trying to steady her voice. "You can't save me from what's already in my blood." "Maybe not," he said softly. "But I can stand between you and those who'd see you bleed for it." He reached out, fingers brushing her jaw, and she froze, not in fear, but because every nerve in her body went still, waiting. His thumb traced her cheekbone, slow, reverent. "Do you know what it's like to crave something you know you can never have?" She met his gaze. "I think we both do." The corner of his mouth curved, but there was no joy in it. "When I was younger, I thought strength meant never bending, never needing anyone. But you," his voice faltered, "you make me question everything I've ever believed." Ava's breath came unsteady. "Then stop questioning. Just feel." He closed his eyes, jaw clenched as if the war inside him was tearing him apart. "If I give in, Ava, there's no going back. The curse will bind us. You'll bear its weight as much as I do." "Maybe it was always meant to be ours," she said softly. "Not hers, ours." Lucien opened his eyes and they glowed faint gold again, not from fury, but from something deeper. He lifted a hand and rested it against her neck, feeling the frantic rhythm of her pulse beneath his thumb. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You shouldn't tempt me." "And yet you're here," she breathed. Their lips met again, slower this time, but no less dangerous. The kiss wasn't the rush of the first, it was a claiming, a confession of everything they'd tried to bury. The storm outside mirrored the one in them, thunder rolling through the night like the pulse of the earth itself. He kissed her until she forgot where she ended and he began. When they parted, the room seemed smaller, the air electric. Lucien rested his forehead against hers, his voice rough. I swore an oath to protect this kingdom, but every moment I spend with you I can feel that oath breaking. Ava's hand slid over his heart, feeling it hammer beneath her palm. Then make a new one. His eyes searched hers. What kind of oath? To protect me, she whispered. Not because I'm the cursed bloodline. Because I'm yours. Lucien froze, the words hanging between them like a spell. He didn't answer, he couldn't. But his arms tightened around her as if letting her go would kill him. Outside, the rain began again, softer this time, almost gentle. He drew back finally, the conflict still flickering behind his eyes. The council will move against us. They won't wait for the moon. Then we move first, she said. He stared at her, surprised. You're serious? I've spent my whole life running from something I didn't understand, Ava said, her voice steady. Not anymore. If there's power in me, I'll use it to protect what's mine, even if that means standing beside the Alpha King who was once my mother's ruin. Lucien's breath caught. You don't have to fight this war, Ava, she smiled faintly. You forget I was born into it. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lucien nodded slowly. Tomorrow we start again. Training, strategy, truth. No more hiding. And tonight? She asked, her tone softer. He looked down at her, the weight of centuries in his eyes, and said quietly, Tonight, I remember what it feels like to be human. He kissed her again, gentle, aching like a man afraid he might lose everything if he let go. And for the first time in years, Ava didn't feel cursed. She felt seen, wanted, chosen. But outside, beneath the castle grounds, the ancient magic that had slept since her mother's death stirred once more. The moon seal, cracked by blood and desire, shimmered faintly with light. Somewhere deep in the dark, a voice whispered through the stones, The king's sin will awaken the goddess. Ava didn't hear it. Neither did Lucien. They only held each other as the rain fell and the world tilted quietly toward its next breaking. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past. The dawn broke quietly over the kingdom, casting long streaks of crimson light across the ancient walls of the castle. The air felt different that morning, thicker, as if the world itself held its breath. Ava stood on the balcony of her chamber, her cloak fluttering around her in the cold wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. Somewhere beyond those mountains, her mother's blood still lingered in the soil, the mark of sacrifice and secrecy. But for the first time, Ava wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. She wanted it. Needed it. Lucien had kept his distance since the night of the storm. He had spoken little, his eyes guarded, but something in his silence told her that a wall had cracked. Not broken, but fractured enough to let in light. The bond between them was no longer deniable. It pulsed in the air whenever he entered a room, the kind of connection that demanded to be felt even when ignored. But beneath that unspoken current, shadows moved. Whispers in the halls, footsteps that stopped when she turned, gazes that lingered too long. The council's fear had taken root. She could feel it watching her every move. When she turned from the balcony, Lucien was already there, silent, watching. He had a way of appearing without sound, as if his presence alone could command space to still. He was dressed for battle training, his dark armor gleaming faintly in the morning light. You should rest, he said quietly. You didn't sleep. Neither did you, she replied. He didn't deny it. There's something you need to see. She followed him through the narrow corridors of the West Wing, the part of the castle sealed off for years, filled with dust and memories. The air smelled of stone and history. He stopped before a tall door carved with the crest of the royal house, the sigil of the moonwolf entwined with a sword. Lucien placed his palm against it, and the old metal locks clicked open as if recognizing him. This chamber hasn't been entered since before your mother died. Her heartbeat stumbled. Why bring me here now? Because the truth you're seeking starts here. Inside, the room was dim and cold. Scrolls lined the walls and a single tapestry hung above the hearth, a depiction of the Blood Moon Pact, the ancient oath that bound the Alpha bloodline to the moon goddess's blessing. But Ava's eyes caught on something else, a familiar pendant resting on a stone pedestal, identical to the one she wore. She approached it slowly, her fingers trembling. "There's another one." Lucien nodded. "Twin talismans. One for her, one for me." Her breath hitched. "You and my mother?" He didn't meet her eyes. "Before the war, before the betrayal, she was my healer, my confidant. And for a time, my heart." The room seemed to shift around her, the air growing tighter. Ava's voice came out low. "You loved her." Lucien's silence was answer enough. He stepped closer, his eyes shadowed with memory. "Your mother saved this kingdom more than once. But the council feared her power, her connection to me, to the goddess. They claimed she'd betrayed us, that she'd aligned with the rogues. I believed them. Until it was too late." Ava turned, her voice trembling with anger. "You let them kill her. I didn't know." His tone cracked, raw and sharp. "By the time I learned the truth, she was already gone. The council forged the charges, used me to deliver her sentence, and she accepted it without a word, because she knew I was the one they truly wanted to destroy." Ava staggered back, her hand pressed against her mouth. The floor beneath her seemed to tilt. "So she died? To protect you?" Lucien's eyes darkened with shame. "Yes. She took the blame to keep the kingdom from turning against its king. Her last words to me were about you. That when her daughter came of age, the moon's seal would rise again. That you would carry both her strength and her curse." Ava's throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. "And what did you promise her?" He met her gaze, unflinching. "That I would protect you, even if it meant protecting you from myself." The silence that followed was unbearable. Ava could hear her own heartbeat echoing in the chamber. It was too much. The grief, the anger, the sudden terrible understanding that everything she'd believed was built on lies. She stepped away from him, voice shaking. "You promised her that, but you still hated me for being her daughter." Lucien's expression softened. "I didn't hate you, Ava. I hated what your presence reminded me of, my failure, my weakness, the face of the woman I condemned." Her tears fell freely now. "You could have told me. And you would have believed me?" he asked, voice breaking. "You came here hating me as much as I hated myself." She wanted to argue, to throw his guilt back at him. But something inside her cracked instead, a deeper ache she hadn't realized she was holding. The pendant on her chest pulsed faintly, glowing with a soft white light. Lucien's eyes widened. "It's awakening again." Ava clutched it, breath unsteady. "It feels like it's calling something." Lucien reached out, his hand steady on her shoulder. "That's the seal reacting to truth. Every secret broken strengthens its power. Then maybe that's what it needs," she whispered. "The truth." But before he could answer, the door burst open. Lucien's beta, a tall, scarred warrior named Rylan, stormed in, his face pale with urgency. "Your Majesty, we have a problem." Lucien turned sharply. "What is it?" "The council's messengers were intercepted last night, carrying letters bearing your seal. Orders for your own arrest. They're planning a coup." Ava's stomach dropped. "They're turning against you." Rylan nodded grimly. "And they're not alone. They've rallied half the outer guard, and they're using the girl's bloodline as justification. They claim the Alpha King is bewitched by the Omega's curse." Lucien cursed under his breath, his control slipping for a heartbeat. "So it begins." Ava straightened, fire flickering in her chest. "Then we end it." Rylan's gaze flicked to her, cold and sharp. "With all due respect, she's the reason this is happening. If she stays, you'll lose the throne. Maybe your life." Lucien's eyes snapped to him, fury flashing. "Watch your tongue," but Ava held up a hand. "No, he's right to speak it." Lucien turned to her, startled. "Ava, if my bloodline is the key they need," she said firmly, "then I'll decide how it's used." Lucien stepped closer, voice low, almost pleading. "You don't understand what you're offering. They'll kill you to take that power. Then let them try." Her gaze didn't waver. "I'm done running from ghosts. If my mother gave her life to protect you, then maybe it's my turn to finish what she started." For a long moment, Lucien just looked at her, not as a threat or a curse, or even as his fated mate, but as an equal. His equal. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Then we stand together." Rylan looked between them, disbelief hardening his jaw. "You're making a mistake, Lucien. She'll destroy you like her mother did." Lucien's answer was quiet, almost tender. "She already has, and I'd let her do it again." The beta's expression flickered. Pity or warning, Ava couldn't tell, before he turned sharply and left. When the door closed, silence settled between them once more. Ava could still feel the pulse of her pendant, the whisper of her mother's memory in her bones. She met Lucien's gaze, her voice steady. Then it's decided. We fight this together. Lucien nodded, his eyes dark and resolute. Together. But in the shadows beyond the door, unseen and unheard, a figure lingered. A servant with trembling hands and a silver crest pinned beneath his cloak. His eyes gleamed faintly in the dark as he slipped away down the corridor, whispering into the crystal hidden in his palm. The girl knows. The king protects her. They'll move soon. A voice crackled faintly through the magic, cold, female, and filled with triumph. Good, it said. Then everything is falling into place. The walls of the castle seemed to shiver as if they too could sense the danger closing in. And for Ava, standing beside the man her mother died to save, one truth was already clear. Every step toward the light cast a longer shadow behind it. The night came faster than usual, a storm brewing above the castle, as if the heavens themselves sensed the betrayal festering within its walls. Candles flickered in the corridors, casting shifting shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. Ava walked through the halls with a strange calmness, the kind that only comes when fear has already burned away. Lucien had gathered the loyal members of his guard in the war room, a circular chamber lined with maps and runes carved into the stone. The air was thick with tension, the scent of steel and blood lingering faintly, preparation for war. When Ava entered, every eye turned to her. Some held pity, others suspicion, a few outright hatred. Ryland stood by the window, arms crossed. His sharp blue eyes flicked to her, then away. He still didn't trust her, and perhaps she thought he never would. Lucien was at the center table, leaning over a map, his voice low but commanding. The council controls the eastern gate. If they close it, we're trapped inside the palace grounds. We move before dawn. Ava stepped closer. You think they'll attack tonight? They'll move when the moon rises, Ryland said darkly. The blood moon is 2 nights away. It's their best chance. The kingdom's power will be weakest then. Ava frowned. Weakest? Lucien looked up, meeting her gaze. The Alpha's strength is tied to the moon's blessing. During a blood moon, the goddess watches in silence. It's the only time our power falters, which means they plan to strike when you're vulnerable, Ava said softly. Lucien nodded. And they'll use your bloodline to justify it. They'll call it purification, cleansing the royal line from the cursed Omega stain. The words made her stomach twist, but she held her ground. Then let's make them regret it. Lucien almost smiled, almost. That's the spirit. They spent the next hours preparing. Ava listened as he assigned his men to guard the western gates and sent coded messages through the Raven's network. But even amid strategy and steel, her thoughts wandered. To her mother, to the pendant that now pulsed faintly with warmth against her chest. Each beat of light felt like a heartbeat. Not her own, but something older, wiser, watching. When the council's banners began to rise on the eastern horizon, the warning bells echoed through the night. The rebellion had begun. Lucien was already in his armor, his presence radiating power and danger. Ava felt her breath catch when she saw him. Not because of his strength, but because she finally understood the weight he carried. The guilt, the fear of failing again. He turned to her as thunder rumbled outside. Stay in the inner sanctum. If they breach the lower halls— No, she interrupted. I'm not hiding. Ava, she stepped closer, eyes fierce. You told me my mother died saving you. Then let me stand beside you now. I'm her daughter, not her shadow. For a moment, the Alpha King and the exiled Omega stood face to face, equals forged in the same fire. Lucien saw the same determination in her that he once saw in her mother's eyes. It terrified him. He brushed past her, voice low. Then stay close. If anything happens, you run. That's not a request. Noted, she murmured. The battle erupted before midnight. Steel clashed against steel in the courtyards. The air filled with the snarls of wolves shifting, the crack of bones, and the roar of magic igniting the night sky. From the upper balcony, Ava saw flames painting the dark horizon, the eastern gate burning. Lucien leapt into the fray, his wolf bursting forth in a storm of black fur and silver fire. He was magnificent, terrifyingly so. Every move was precise, lethal, beautiful. The kind of power that made men kneel and gods turn away. But among the chaos, something felt wrong. The enemy moved with unnatural coordination, guided by something beyond strategy. And then she saw it, a glint of silver light in the tower above the eastern wall. A spell. Ava's pulse quickened. No. She ran. Her feet pounded against the stone as she raced through the corridors toward the tower. The pendant against her chest burned hotter with each step, warning her. When she burst through the door, she found the traitor, the servant from before, the one who'd lingered in the shadows, knelt before a sigil drawn in blood, chanting words that made the air shimmer with dark energy. "Stop," Ava shouted. He turned, his eyes glowing crimson. "You shouldn't be here, cursed child." The sigil flared, sending waves of energy that made the walls tremble. The pendant's light burst forth, shielding her. The servant hissed, his form twisting. Not human anymore, but something corrupted, half shadow and half wolf. "You're working with them," she breathed. "The council. They promised you power." He smiled, teeth sharp and gleaming. "They promised freedom from him, from your cursed blood." He lunged. Ava's instincts took over. The white fire within her surged to life, her wolf's spirit roaring in her veins. She raised her hands and the air exploded with light. The creature screamed, consumed by the purity of her power, leaving behind only ashes and the fading echo of a curse. When the light faded, Ava collapsed to her knees, trembling. Her hands glowed faintly, veins pulsing with silvery light. She felt changed, stronger, but terrified of what that meant. Footsteps thundered behind her. Lucien appeared, bloodied and panting, his wolf still flickering beneath his skin. He froze when he saw her. "Ava, what did you do?" "I stopped him," she whispered. "He was casting something. Dark magic. It would have destroyed you." Lucien crossed the room in seconds, grabbing her shoulders, searching her eyes as if to make sure she was real. "You used the seal?" "I didn't mean to." Her voice cracked. "It just happened." He looked at her hands, one still faintly glowing, then back at her face. "That power, it's not just the goddess's gift. It's a curse and a blessing both." Ava swallowed hard. "I can control it. I just need time." Lucien exhaled slowly, his expression torn between fear and awe. "You might be the only one who can stop what's coming." "What do you mean?" "The council's not just rebelling," he said darkly. "They're awakening something older, the same power that once cursed your mother's bloodline. The ritual has already begun." Lightning split the sky outside and the castle shook with distant roars. Ava's heart pounded. "Then tell me what I have to do." Lucien's gaze locked on hers, fierce and unyielding. "You stand by my side no matter what. And when the time comes, you trust me, even if the world calls me your enemy." Ava nodded once, the pendant's glow matching the fire in her eyes. "Then let them call us what they will. We'll make them remember who we are." Below them, the battle raged on, but something had changed. For the first time since her exile, Ava no longer felt lost or cursed. She was no longer just the Omega who returned to mourn her mother. She was her mother's legacy, and soon the world would know it. The smoke of battle hung thick in the air. The courtyard below the tower was soaked in blood and moonlight, the cries of wounded wolves echoing through the shattered halls. Ava and Lucien descended the stairs side by side, their hearts pounding in the same rhythm, part adrenaline, part bond. But something was wrong. The closer they came to the war room, the quieter it became. No shouts, no guards, no clash of steel, only the eerie silence of aftermath. When they entered, the scene froze her blood. Ryland stood over the fallen bodies of 3 royal guards, his sword dripping red. His face was pale but calm, too calm. Lucien stiffened. "Ryland, what have you done?" The beta turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "What I had to, my king." Ava's stomach twisted. You were the spy." Ryland's lips curved into something between sorrow and defiance. "Spy? No, savior. You think I'd let this kingdom rot under the curse of your bloodline again?" Lucien's voice was low and dangerous. "You swore an oath to me, and I kept it," Ryland snapped. "Until you lost yourself. Until you brought her into this palace and her mother's mirror. The woman who destroyed you once, now reborn to do it again." Ava's chest tightened. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," he hissed. Your mother bewitched him once. She made him weak. And now you've done the same. Lucien's growl rumbled through the room, low and primal. Careful, Rylan. But Rylan only laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. You think you're still a king? The council already sealed your fate. They'll purge this curse before dawn. You can't protect her, Lucien. You can't even protect yourself. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the rage in Lucien's eyes. You betrayed your pack. You betrayed me. Rylan's grip tightened on his sword. You betrayed the goddess the moment you let your heart blind you. Before Lucien could move, Rylan swung his blade. The strike was meant for Ava, fast, merciless. But Lucien intercepted it, the clash of steel echoing like thunder. Sparks flew as the two men, Alpha and Beta, brothers in arms turned enemies, fought across the room. Ava could barely follow their movements. Every blow carried years of loyalty, anger, and heartbreak. Lucien's eyes blazed gold, his wolf close to the surface. Rylan's movements were desperate, wild, the fury of a man who believed betrayal was righteousness. When Lucien finally disarmed him, the sword clattered to the ground. Rylan fell to his knees, blood trickling from his lip. End it, he spat. Do what you should have done long ago. End this curse. Lucien hesitated. Ava could see it. The pain in his eyes, the part of him that still remembered Rylan as his brother. Rylan laughed bitterly. Still too weak. Ava stepped forward, her pendant glowing faintly. He's not weak. He's the only one here strong enough to forgive. The word seemed to hit Rylan harder than any blade could. For a moment, the fire in his eyes faltered. Then he slumped, defeated as Lucien stepped back. Lock him in the lower cells, Lucien ordered the approaching guards. He'll answer for his crimes when this is over. Rylan didn't resist as they dragged him away, his eyes fixed on Ava. You'll bring ruin, girl. Just like she did. Ava didn't reply. His words didn't pierce her, not anymore. Because for the first time, she wasn't running from her mother's shadow. She was walking beside it. When the doors shut, silence filled the room again. Lucien leaned against the table, exhausted. The armor across his chest was cracked, blood staining the edges of his collar. Ava moved toward him instinctively, pressing her hand to his wound. He caught her wrist gently. Don't, you've already done enough tonight. Her voice trembled. You're bleeding. He gave a faint, humorless smile. You should see the other guy. But she didn't smile back. She reached up, brushing her thumb along his jaw. You almost died protecting me. His golden eyes softened, the fury melting into something raw. I told you I would. The air between them shifted, quiet, charged, intimate. The pendant at her throat glowed faintly, the bond humming like a heartbeat shared between them. You shouldn't look at me like that, she whispered. Lucien's voice was low. How should I look at you then? Like I'm not her, he exhaled slowly as if the truth cost him to speak. I've been trying not to, her heart twisted. And failing? Every day. The words broke something inside her, not in pain but in recognition. Because she'd been fighting the same thing, the same impossible pull. The same guilt that love could still exist between two souls bound by tragedy. But the moment was fragile, and the world outside was still bleeding. Lucien straightened, pulling away, his face hardening again. The council's attack failed for now, but they'll strike again. They'll come for you first. Then we need to get to them before they get to us, Ava said firmly. He shook his head. You're not ready. You barely survived your first awakening. She stepped closer, her eyes fierce. And yet I'm still standing. My mother didn't raise me to hide. Lucien looked at her, truly looked. At the strength behind her trembling hands, the fire behind her tears. You're so much like her, he murmured. And nothing like her at all. Ava's voice softened. Then maybe that's exactly what this kingdom needs. For a long moment he said nothing. Then finally he nodded. At dawn we ride to the council's citadel. If they want a war, they'll have one. Ava's pendant flared once more, a soft white light that filled the room. Then let's make it one they'll never forget. Lucien met her gaze, and something in his eyes, the guilt, the anger, the love, shifted into resolve. I made your mother a promise, he said quietly. But the promise I make to you is mine alone. And what promise is that? She asked. That I'll see this through, even if it destroys me. Ava's throat tightened. You always think everything ends in destruction. He smiled faintly, a shadow of warmth breaking through the storm. With us it usually does. Their hands brushed, not an embrace but a vow sealed in silence. Outside, the storm eased, the first light of dawn breaking across the battlefield. The fires were dying, the blood cooling, the air trembling with what came next. The kingdom was far from saved. The traitors still lived, their magic festering in hidden halls. But for now, for this fragile heartbeat between battles, Ava and Lucien stood together, not as enemies or victims of fate, but as two souls finally unafraid of the truth. Because sometimes, love wasn't born in peace. It was forged in the ashes of betrayal, and as the first sunlight touched the stone floor between them, Lucien reached out, his voice a whisper meant only for her. "Whatever happens next, Ava, we face it together." She met his gaze steady and sure. Together. And though the storm had passed for the moment, the shadows that stirred beyond the horizon promised one thing. The worst was yet to come. Chapter 6. The Fall of the King. The dawn after the battle came bruised and red, as if the sky itself bled for what was to come. The fires in the courtyard had burned to embers, the wounded were carried away, and the palace walls, once symbols of power, now felt like a tomb waiting to be sealed. Ava stood on the balcony overlooking the ruined fields. Her eyes, rimmed with exhaustion, traced the horizon where the moon still lingered pale against the morning light. The blood moon was rising tonight, the night her fate and Lucien's would be written in blood. Lucien joined her quietly, his presence a familiar gravity. He'd discarded his armor, the deep scar from the last battle visible along his ribs, a cruel reminder of both his mortality and his defiance of it. "The council won't wait much longer," he said, voice low, roughened by sleeplessness. "They've been gathering their forces near the Silver Veil. By nightfall, they'll be here." Ava turned toward him, her silver hair glinting faintly in the cold light. "Then we have until the blood moon to prepare." His gaze softened at the determination in her tone. "You shouldn't have to fight this battle. But it's mine," she said quietly. "It's always been mine. My mother's curse, my blood, my choice?" Lucien's jaw tightened. "You sound just like her." A small smile ghosted her lips. "Then maybe there's hope for me yet." He looked away as if the mention of her mother reopened an old wound that never truly healed. "She said the same thing once, before the council took everything from her." "And you?" Ava asked softly. "What did they take from you?" Lucien met her gaze, gold flecks catching in his dark eyes. Her. The word carried the weight of years, of promises broken and debts unpaid. And yet, standing there beside Ava, it felt less like an ending and more like a circle completing itself. The silence between them stretched, heavy, intimate, fragile. Then Ava spoke again, her voice steadier than her heart. "If tonight is what they've been waiting for, then we make it ours." "Not theirs?" Lucien studied her face as though searching for a trace of fear. "You understand what happens if the blood moon ritual fails?" "I die," she said simply. "But if it succeeds," he finished for her, his tone dark, "you become something neither human nor wolf. A god in chains." Ava stepped closer, her eyes unflinching. "Then I'll break them." Lucien's lips parted to argue, but the determination in her gaze silenced him. For a heartbeat, he saw not the frightened girl he'd once saved, but a queen, fierce, unyielding, carved from the same fire her mother once wielded. "You're not ready for what that power will do to you," he murmured. "Maybe not," she said. "But I'm ready for what I have to do with it." He almost smiled. "That's what scares me." Ava tilted her head. "Not the council?" "No," Lucien said quietly, his gaze softening. "Losing you." She blinked back the ache that rose in her chest. "Then don't." But even as she said it, she saw the truth flicker in his eyes. He already knew he would. By twilight, the palace had transformed into a fortress. The air hummed with tension, the scent of steel, blood, and burning herbs clinging to the cold stone corridors. Ava stood in the sacred courtyard, where the moon's first red glow had begun to bleed across the night. The ritual circle was drawn in silver ash, ancient runes spiraling outward from its center like veins of light. At the heart of it stood an altar carved from obsidian, cold and waiting. Lucien approached, dressed in ceremonial armor blacker than night. His presence was both regal and haunted, the aura of a man walking toward destiny with open eyes. "You don't have to stand in the circle," he said, voice low. "Once it begins, there's no stopping it." I won't run, Ava replied. Not anymore. He nodded once, then stepped closer, his gloved hand brushing hers. When the moon reaches its peak, the council will strike. Their magic will try to bind you, twist the ritual. You'll feel pain, more than you think you can bear. But don't let go of your wolf. If you do, I die, she finished, her tone steady. He gave a faint, bitter smile. You keep saying that like it doesn't terrify me. Ava smiled softly in return. It does. That's why it won't happen. Lucien exhaled, the ghost of a laugh breaking through the weight of the moment. You've become impossible to argue with. I had a good teacher. He looked at her for a long moment, not as his student, not as the cursed Omega, but as something far more dangerous to his heart. You remind me why I made that promise, he said quietly. To my mother, she guessed, his gaze didn't waver. To you. The words landed between them like a blade, sharp, irreversible. And before either could speak again, the bells tolled from the western towers. The council had come. The first strike came like thunder. Magic shattered the barrier walls. A storm of violet flame tearing through the palace gates. Wolves cried out as they shifted midair, torn between form and fury. The courtyard filled with chaos. Soldiers clashing with cloaked counselors. The night erupting in light and blood. Ava's pendant flared with power, the runes beneath her feet glowing brighter as the blood moon climbed higher. Lucien drew his sword, a blade forged in moonfire, and stood before her, his voice carrying above the battle's roar. Stay in the circle! No matter what happens, don't break it. Ava's eyes glowed silver. If you fall, I will. Then I'll make sure I don't, he growled, flashing her the kind of grin that made her heart stutter even in war. Then he turned, his body a blur of motion, meeting the first wave of council soldiers head-on. Ava's world became fire and light. The magic around her pulsed, responding to her heartbeat, feeding on the blood of the moon. Her mother's voice whispered faintly through the storm, words she hadn't heard in years. He'll either save you or end you. Ava's breath caught. Not this time, she whispered. Not tonight. The sky split open. Red light poured over the courtyard as the blood moon reached its zenith, and Ava felt the wolf inside her stir, not as a curse but as a promise fulfilled. The air trembled. Her body burned with power. The runes beneath her flared white-hot. Lucien looked back once, his eyes meeting hers across the chaos. And in that instant, blood, smoke, magic swirling between them, he smiled, because he knew what came next. The sacrifice was already written. The moment the moon reached its peak, the air turned to fire. The runes beneath Ava's feet blazed white, then red, then a fierce silver that seared through the smoke. The courtyard shuddered with power. Stone cracked. Every howl, every blade, every heartbeat seemed to fall in rhythm with hers. The blood moon had claimed them all. Lucien moved like a shadow cut from flame. He tore through the council's guards with impossible grace, every strike of his sword a vow renewed, every breath a defiance of fate. The crimson light made him look almost inhuman, something born of war and prophecy, and through the chaos his gaze never left Ava. She could feel him even when she couldn't see him, his scent, his pulse, the invisible thread that pulled them together through the storm. Her mother's pendant pulsed in answer, pressing against her chest as if alive. Focus, she told herself, but her voice trembled. The magic was growing stronger, too strong. Her skin burned, the silver markings crawling up her arms like living fire. The wolf inside her wanted out. A cloaked counselor leapt across the circle's edge, hurling a blade of dark magic straight toward her heart. Lucien was faster. He caught the blast with his sword, the collision exploding in light. The impact sent him crashing against the altar, blood spilling down his arm. Lucien, Ava cried, breaking her stance. Stay inside the circle, he snarled, forcing himself to his feet. The counselor sneered from the shadows. You protect her like you protected the mother. And we all remember how that ended. Lucien lunged before the man could speak again. The clash rang out like thunder. But even as he fought, the council's magic thickened, twisting the air with whispers. They weren't just attacking, they were binding. Ava felt the pull, invisible chains snaking around her wrists and throat, dragging her down. The ritual was turning against her. She could hear her mother's voice in the roar of the storm. Your blood is the key, and the curse her knees buckled. The runes beneath her shifted from silver to crimson. She screamed, the sound tearing through the night. Her wolf's energy surged outward, a blinding wave that flung enemies backward. Lucien turned, eyes wide with horror. "Ava, control it!" "I can't," she choked, falling to her hands. The power was devouring her from the inside. Every breath a war against her own magic. "It's too much." He dropped his sword and ran to her. "Look at me." She did, and the world went still. The light dimmed to a heartbeat's pulse. The chains of energy wavered. In his eyes she saw everything she'd fought to deny. The guilt that haunted him, the promise he'd made, the love he'd tried to bury. "You are not her curse," he whispered, voice rough, steady. "You are her redemption." Something in her broke open. The wild magic steadied, the glow around her shifting from red to pure white. She took his hand, and together they stood inside the circle. The moonlight poured down like a river. Every rune, every symbol came alive. The energy built until the ground itself cracked. Lucien felt the pull of the ritual tearing at his soul. Its design was changing. The council had meant it to bind the wolf, not awaken it. But Ava's power was rewriting the spell. "They'll destroy you," he shouted over the storm. "Then they'll burn with me," she cried back. From the edges of the courtyard, a dozen counselors lifted their hands, their voices blending in dark chant. The air turned black with smoke and magic. Lucien stepped in front of her, taking the brunt of the spell. The blast hit his chest like lightning, driving him to his knees. Ava screamed his name and caught him before he fell. His armor smoked, blood seeping through the cracks. He pressed his hand to her cheek, leaving a smear of red. "You were never meant to carry this alone," he gasped. "Don't you dare," she said, shaking her head violently. "Don't you?" He smiled weakly. "I kept my promise." Then another blast hit. The council's leader, an ancient wolf wrapped in shadow, raising both hands. The force slammed into Lucien's back, and the sound that left him was part snarl, part broken breath. His blood hit the ground inside the ritual circle, mingling with Ava's power. Something in the spell snapped. The sky split open in two directions, one side crimson, one white, and from the tear poured pure light. The blood on the runes flared, transforming the ritual entirely. Ava's wolf roared to life, tearing through her skin in a storm of silver fur and blinding radiance. The guards stumbled back, covering their faces. Even the counselors faltered, their spells collapsing under the weight of the power they'd unleashed. Lucien looked up at her, barely conscious, and in his fading vision saw not a cursed Omega, but the goddess her mother had once dreamed she could become. He smiled faintly. "So this is what freedom looks like." Ava, glowing, trembling, stepped toward him, half human, half light. "Stay with me, please." His hand reached for hers, but the power between them sparked violently, as though the universe itself refused to let them touch. He gritted his teeth, forcing his arm higher until their fingers brushed. In that instant, the world exploded. The white wolf screamed through the heavens, her howl shaking the stars. Every counselor within sight was thrown to the ground, their bodies dissolving into ash under the surge. The ancient palace shuddered. Pillars fell, banners burned. The moonlight turned everything silver and red. Ava's magic cascaded outward, erasing the darkness like dawn swallowing night, and when the light finally faded, she fell to her knees beside Lucien. He was still breathing, but barely. Her hands shook as she lifted him. His eyes fluttered open, gold fading to amber. "Ava, no, don't," she whispered. "You're not done." "We're not done." He gave a broken laugh, then coughed, blood staining his lips. "I told you. I'd protect you. Even from myself. You already did." Her tears fell onto his armor, shining in the moonlight. "Now let me protect you." "You can't." His voice was barely a breath. "It's too late." She gripped his hand tightly. "Don't you dare die on my love story." He smiled again, soft, almost peaceful. "Then make it a promise worth keeping." The blood moon glowed one final time, a heartbeat of red across the sky. The power in the air ebbed, leaving only silence, smoke, and the scent of rain. Ava held him as his body went still. The light around her dimmed to nothing. The battlefield lay silent except for the hiss of dying fires. The courtyard that once echoed with the clash of swords now smelled of rain and blood. Ash drifted like slow snow over broken stone. Torn banners fluttered against the skeletal spires of the palace. Ava knelt beside Lucien's body where the ritual circle had burned itself into the ground. The runes still glowed faintly, carved by blood and moonlight. His chest rose only shallowly, his breath sounding like wind against cracked glass. She pressed her hand over the wound, refusing to accept its stillness. "Lucien," she whispered, "you're the Alpha King. You don't get to leave before I tell you how much I hate you for saving me." Her voice broke on the last word. The white light that had filled her during the battle still flickered under her skin, searching for a place to go. She felt both infinite and hollow. The wolf inside her howled, not for rage now, but for loss. Around her, the survivors knelt. The guards who had once feared her now bowed their heads in silent reverence. They had seen what she'd become, not a curse, not a monster, but something holy and terrible. Even the air seemed to kneel before her grief. She brushed a strand of his hair from his forehead, her fingers trembling. "You said you'd protect me even from yourself. You didn't say it would cost everything." His eyes fluttered open for a heartbeat. "It was never a cost," he murmured. "It was the promise." Then they closed again, and the final tremor of breath left him. Ava didn't scream. The sound that came from her throat was too deep for language, a raw, ancient thing that split the night apart. The sky answered. The blood moon dimmed, its red glow fading into a pale, mournful silver. She felt something pull at her heart, a thread stretching toward the heavens. Lucien's spirit, the bond they had never spoken of but always felt, was being drawn away. "No," she whispered, clutching his hand. "You said make it a promise worth keeping. So I will." The pendant at her throat pulsed once, twice, then flared with white fire. The ritual circle reignited, surrounding them both in light. His blood and hers mingled on the runes, forming a single symbol, the mark of unity. Power surged through her veins, sharp and cold. She realized then what the ritual had truly been. Not a curse, but a passage. The goddess within the white wolf rose fully for the first time. The pain of loss became its fuel, her tears its catalyst. She felt her heartbeat sync with the pulse of the earth, with every star above. Lucien's warmth lingered in that rhythm, as if the universe had kept a part of him alive through her. She laid her forehead against his and whispered, "If you have to fall, then I'll rise high enough for both of us." Light exploded outward again, sweeping across the courtyard. The flames extinguished. The wounds of the surviving wolves closed. The bodies of the dead were wrapped in silver mist and carried gently into nothingness, as though the moon herself was taking them home. When the radiance faded, Ava stood alone. Her once white dress was streaked with crimson and soot, her hair tangled, eyes glowing faint silver. The moonlight clung to her like armor. The beta, Rylan, approached slowly, sword lowered, eyes wide with awe. "My queen," he said, voice shaking. Ava turned toward him, her tone steady, too calm for what she felt. "Don't call me that. You ended them," he said. "The council is gone." "The curse, it's not gone," she interrupted. "It just changed its keeper." Rylan hesitated. "The king?" She looked down at Lucien's still form. "He kept his promise. Now it's my turn." For a long time, no one moved. The soldiers, the healers, even the wind seemed to wait for her next breath. Then Ava reached for Lucien's sword, the moonfire blade, and lifted it high. Its light burned pure again, cleansing. "This isn't the end of his reign," she said. "It's the beginning of his legacy." The crowd bowed as one, heads lowering in silence. The moon shone on her face, catching the tear that traced down her cheek. She felt the weight of destiny settle on her shoulders. Not the crown, but the vow. Protect what he died for. Guard the realm that had once betrayed her mother and broken its king. She would not let his sacrifice vanish into myth. Later, when the survivors had gone and the fires were finally cold, Ava stayed beside him. The night was strangely quiet now, only the whisper of the wind moving through the shattered arches. She reached for the pendant again. Its light was fading, but not gone. Somewhere within it, she could still feel his heartbeat. She closed her eyes and saw flashes of memory, his hand catching hers during training, his voice calling her name across the courtyard, the look in his eyes the moment before he fell. Every image burned into her as both wound and comfort. "You kept your promise," she murmured. "Now I'll keep mine." The white wolf stirred again, restless beneath her skin. It wanted to run, to howl, to tear the heavens apart until he answered. But Ava stayed still. She understood now that strength wasn't always in the fight. It was in the staying, the remembering. She rose at last, the sword in one hand, the pendant glowing faintly at her throat. Dawn touched the horizon, bleeding pale light over the ruins. The blood moon was gone, replaced by the first fragile stars of morning. Ava looked to the sky. "Goodbye, my king," she whispered. "Rest, but don't forget me." The breeze shifted, carrying a scent that made her chest ache: cedar, smoke, and rain. Lucien's scent. It lingered a moment, then was gone. She smiled through her tears. "Typical," she said softly. "You never could leave quietly." Then she turned toward the palace gates, where the future waited, uncertain, broken, yet still breathing. Every step she took left a faint shimmer on the stone, as if the moonlight itself followed her. Behind her, the runes in the courtyard dimmed to ash. By the time the sun broke fully over the horizon, the battlefield was empty, and the legend of the Alpha King and the White Wolf was already taking shape, told in whispers, half remembered like a prayer or a warning. And though the kingdom would one day rebuild, no one who had stood beneath that blood moon ever forgot the sight of the girl who rose from ruin, holding the fallen king's blade and wearing the light of both love and loss. She had been cursed. She had been chosen. And now she was becoming everything the prophecy had never dared to imagine. The last line of his promise echoed in her heart. Then make it a promise worth keeping. She would. Even if it meant defying the gods themselves. Chapter 7. The Promise Beneath the Moon. The moon hung pale and swollen above the valley, its light spilling like milk over the sleeping forest. The castle beyond the ridge was half rebuilt, scaffolding rising from its bones, banners newly sewn in silver and white. But Ava didn't look back at it. She followed the narrow path through the woods, where wildflowers had begun to bloom between cracks of old stone, and where the wind whispered the names of the fallen. It had been 6 weeks since the blood moon, 6 weeks since Lucien's last breath and her promise that she would make it worth keeping. The nights had grown quieter since then, the howls softer, almost reverent. The pack had accepted her as their queen, though she still refused the title aloud. They had buried their king in sacred ground, beneath the ancient willow where the wolves once swore their oaths to the moon. And it was there she returned tonight, to her mother's grave, and to his. The path wound downward into a grove where moonlight fell in ribbons. 2 stone markers stood side by side, half covered in moss, circled by a ring of silver blossoms. The wolves that guarded the graves lifted their heads as she approached. They did not growl. They only lowered their eyes, parting silently to let her through. Ava knelt, brushing her fingertips over the names carved into the stone. Her mother's first, weathered but proud. Then Lucien's, newer, the edges still sharp. For a long time she didn't speak. The night carried only the rustle of leaves and the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. When she finally found her voice, it came softly. "You both kept your promises," she whispered. "Now it's my turn." Her words drifted into the night, light as breath, but the earth seemed to listen. The wind shifted, stirring her hair. A faint glow pulsed beneath the soil, threads of moonlight weaving through the roots of the willow. Ava closed her eyes. "Mother," she said, "you saved him when no one else would. You gave your life so he could live. And Lucien, you gave yours so I could find mine." She smiled faintly through tears. "You're both terrible at goodbyes." The wolves around her lowered their heads. Somewhere in the distance a single howl rose, long, mournful, and full of devotion. It echoed through the trees, joined by another and another until the whole forest sang. Ava tilted her head back, letting the sound wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel the ache of loss pressing against her ribs. Instead, she felt connection, threads of memory, spirit, and love tying her to something larger than grief. When she opened her eyes again, she saw it. The light. It began as a shimmer at the edge of the grave, faint as mist. Then it grew, swirling upward like silver smoke. Ava rose slowly, heart pounding. The glow gathered form. Tall, broad-shouldered, the outline of a man stepping out of moonlight itself. Her breath caught. "Lucien?" The figure took another step forward, and the shimmer solidified into flesh and shadow. His face, his eyes, his unmistakable presence. He was dressed in white and gray, a faint aura around him as though the moon refused to let go. His gaze met hers, filled with the same impossible warmth she thought she'd lost forever. "It took you long enough," she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled. Tired, wry, familiar. You always were impatient. A sob broke loose from her chest as she stumbled toward him. When her hands touched his chest, he didn't vanish. He was solid, warm, real. She pressed her forehead against him, her tears falling freely now. I buried you, she said, half laughing, half crying. I saw you die. I did, he murmured, resting a hand against her cheek. But the bond didn't, it never could. She looked up at him, her heart pounding wildly. You came back because of it? He nodded. Our wolves wouldn't let go. When the moon took me, she found two spirits intertwined, yours and mine. She said such promises aren't meant to break. Ava stared at him, hardly daring to breathe. So this is the price and the gift, Lucien finished softly. I don't know how long I'm meant to stay. Maybe a night, maybe forever. But I'm here, Ava, I found my way back. The tears came harder then, not from sorrow, but from something purer. Release. She laughed through them, shaking her head. Of course you did. You never could stay dead when I needed you alive. Lucien's smile deepened. Stubbornness is contagious. She leaned up and kissed him. It wasn't desperate like before. It was slow, reverent, and a promise renewed. When they broke apart, the wolves had risen silently around them, forming a circle beneath the willow. Their eyes gleamed silver in the light, reflecting the reunion of their alpha and queen. Lucien looked around, his expression softening. They remember. They never forgot, Ava said. None of us did. He took her hand, fingers intertwining, and together they faced the graves, the ones who had started it all. Ava felt a peace settle over her chest, heavy and full but not painful anymore. Lucien's thumb brushed her wrist. She'd be proud of you, he said. Ava smiled faintly. She'd scold me first, he chuckled. Probably. Then she'd scold me for letting you fight alone. They stood like that for a long time, hand in hand, surrounded by the quiet song of wolves and the rustle of moonlit leaves. It felt like the world had stopped spinning just for them. And for the first time since the war, since the betrayal, since the blood and fire of the ritual, Ava felt truly alive. The night stretched on, gentle and infinite. The light that had once been cursed now shimmered through the trees, weaving through fir and stone, turning the forest silver. Ava turned to Lucien, her eyes still glistening. What now? He looked toward the horizon, where the faintest hint of dawn waited. Now, he said softly, we rebuild not the throne, but the promise. The wolves howled again, their voices rising in harmony beneath the fading moon, as if sealing his words into the air. And in that moment, Ava knew the story wasn't ending at all. It was beginning again. The first pale shimmer of dawn touched the forest as Ava and Lucien stood together beneath the willow. The wolves' howls softened to low rhythmic hums, an ancient song that carried through bark and stone. Mist curled around their ankles, and every breath they took felt like it belonged to a new world being born. Lucien's fingers remained laced with hers, warm, strong, real. Ava's heart still refused to believe, yet every pulse in her veins answered his like a drum. She felt the strange energy between them, the bond that had once chained them in pain, now pulsing with peace. The white light of her wolf flickered behind her eyes, calm at last. Do you feel it? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Lucien closed his eyes, inhaling the morning air. The forest? No, she smiled faintly. Life. For a long moment they listened, to the tiny heartbeat of the earth waking, to the rustle of wings, to the wolves padding closer. The smallest of them, a silver-furred pup, crept forward and placed its head against Lucien's knee. Ava knelt to stroke it, and the other wolves followed, surrounding them in a slow-moving ring. Not a pack guarding its rulers anymore, but a family welcoming them home. Lucien's voice was low. They remember what we lost. They're waiting for you to speak. Ava hesitated. To me? To their queen. The word still unsettled her, heavy with weight and expectation. Queen. She had been an exile, an omega with a scar and a secret. Yet here she was, crowned not by ceremony but by survival. She turned to face the wolves, the moonlight and dawnlight crossing on her hair like a crown of silver fire. Her voice trembled at first. We've bled enough, she said softly. We've buried too many promises in the ground. From this day we rise not as the broken but as the bound, by choice, by love, by the moon itself. The wolves bowed their heads in unison. The sound of the forest shifted, no longer mourning but breathing anew. Lucien watched her with quiet pride. When she turned to him, she caught the glint of tears in his eyes. "You were always meant to lead," he said. She shook her head. "We lead together," he smiled. "Then together it is." Later that morning they walked back toward the castle. The path wound through the ruins of the old courtyard, where vines crawled over shattered marble. The banners had been rehung overnight by loyal hands. A black wolf and a white wolf intertwined beneath a crescent moon. The people who saw them return fell silent. Some dropped to their knees. Others simply stared as though witnessing a legend made flesh. Lucien squeezed her hand once before addressing the gathered wolves. "My brothers, my sisters," he began, his voice resonant but gentle. "I stand before you not as the king you buried, but as the man your faith restored. The council that betrayed us is gone. The blood moon's curse is broken. We have one duty now, to rebuild a world that deserves her light." He looked at Ava. "And you will follow her as you once followed me, for she is the balance I never had." A murmur of approval swept through the pack. One of the elders, gray-muzzled, eyes gleaming, stepped forward and pressed his paw to the ground. "Then the moon has chosen true," he said. "The line is renewed." Ava felt warmth surge through her chest, an almost unbearable blend of joy and disbelief. When Lucien's arm slipped around her waist, grounding her, she finally allowed herself to breathe. That night the celebration filled the castle grounds. Torches ringed the courtyard, casting gold against stone. Music, soft flutes, deep drums rose like heartbeats. Wolves danced in human form, laughter mingling with the scent of pine and rain. Ava stood on the balcony watching them. For the first time in years there was no fear in the air, only belonging. She leaned on the railing, her silver gown glinting like spilled starlight. Lucien joined her, silent for a while, until she felt his hand rest lightly on hers. "You should be down there," he murmured. "They're celebrating you." She smiled without looking away from the crowd. "Us. Us," he echoed. They watched the fires sway in rhythm with the music. Then he turned to her, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "When I first met you at the grave," he said quietly, "I saw your mother's eyes and thought I was cursed. Now I see yours and I know I was wrong." Ava met his gaze, heart fluttering. "Wrong how?" "That curse was never death," he whispered. "It was love waiting for its time." The music below slowed. A hush fell over the courtyard as the moon climbed higher, full and glowing. Lucien extended his hand. "Dance with me?" Ava hesitated only a moment before placing her palm against his. The warmth there felt eternal. They moved together slowly, not bound by rhythm but by memory. Each step was a thread in the tapestry they had torn and rewoven. When his hand slid to the small of her back, she felt the bond flare again. Not a burn this time, but a pulse alive and steady. "You're real," she murmured, as though still testing the truth. "So are you," he replied. They danced until the music faded, until only the sound of the forest and the wolves' soft breathing remained. Then, with the world hushed around them, he leaned close and rested his forehead against hers. "We were forged in fire," he said. "Now we live in light," she smiled. "And if the fire comes again?" He kissed her brow. "Then we burn together." Later, as the fires died down and the pack slept, Ava walked alone through the silent halls. The castle no longer felt haunted. Its shadows were softer now, filled with whispers of those who'd loved and lost before her. She passed the throne room, its seats draped in white cloth, and entered the old library where the first histories of their kind were kept. She lit a candle and opened a book bound in faded leather. Inside were records of every ruler, every war, every promise broken and kept. At the last page she found 2 blank lines waiting. She dipped a quill in ink and wrote, "Lucien Drace, the king who fell for the moon. Ava Drace, the queen who rose with her light." When she closed the book, a soft rustle stirred behind her. Lucien stood in the doorway, the candlelight gilding his hair. "Writing history already?" he asked. She smiled. "Just finishing it." He approached, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then let it be a story worth remembering." "It already is." He kissed her then, slow and certain, sealing the promise in the quiet heart of the castle, while the moon poured its blessing through the tall windows. Outside, The forest shimmered. The wolves howled not in grief or war this time, but in joy, a sound that rolled across mountains and rivers, carrying with it the echo of renewal. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the moon herself seemed to smile. Ava pulled back to look at Lucien, her eyes luminous. "This isn't the end, is it?" He shook his head gently. "No, my queen. It's the beginning of forever." The night had turned clear, the kind of stillness that happens only once in a lifetime, when the air forgets to move and the stars seem to lean closer. The celebration had faded to whispers and sleeping embers. Ava and Lucien stood alone on the balcony above the forest, the wind moving faintly through her hair, the scent of pine and rain lingering like a benediction. Below them, the pack rested in a circle of trust. Wolves lay curled together, their breathing steady, unafraid. It felt like the world had finally exhaled after centuries of holding its breath. Lucien's arm slid around her shoulders. "Do you hear it?" he murmured. She tilted her head, listening. "The forest?" "No." His smile touched his voice. "Peace." Ava's throat tightened. "I never thought I'd live to hear that." "Neither did I," he said. "You gave it back to me." For a long while they simply watched the stars drift. The moonlight touched the scar on Ava's wrist, the mark left from the blood moon ritual, and shimmered faintly. When she looked down, the faint white glow spread along her skin, delicate as lace. Lucien caught her hand, eyes widening as the same light mirrored across his veins. "The bond," she whispered. "It's still there." He nodded. "Not to chain us, to remind us." The glow pulsed once and then sank into their skin, leaving behind only warmth. At dawn, they went to the grave once more. The clearing looked different now. The soil had been softened by rain, new shoots of grass breaking through. The two guardian wolves waited, their coats sleek and eyes bright. Ava knelt before the stone, tracing her mother's name with steady fingers. "You both kept your promises," she said softly, echoing her earlier words. "Now it's my turn." Lucien stepped beside her, placing his hand over hers. "What promise will you make?" A faint smile touched her lips. "To rule not with fear but with faith. To protect what she died for and what you lived for." He bent his head, his voice rough with emotion. "Then the kingdom will never fall again." The wolves bowed low, and from the horizon the first full light of morning broke through the trees. The rays hit the grave and burst into silvery beams that spiraled upward, wrapping around Ava and Lucien in a halo of moonlight and sunfire combined. The forest shimmered, every leaf trembling with life. Ava closed her eyes, feeling her mother's presence, gentle, approving, free. Lucien's hand tightened around hers, grounding her to the living world. When the light faded, they were left standing together in silence. A single white flower had grown from the earth beside the grave, its petals gleaming like frost. Ava plucked it carefully and tucked it into Lucien's chest plate. "For remembrance," she whispered. "For forever," he answered. Weeks passed. The castle grew whole again. Laughter filled its corridors. The scent of baking bread replaced that of blood and ash. Wolves trained in the courtyards. Children chased fireflies in the dusk. Peace, real and tangible, had finally taken root. Yet at night, when the moon rose full and round, Ava and Lucien would walk the forest path together. They said little. Words seemed too small for what they shared, but every glance, every brush of fingers, spoke the language of a bond that had been written in blood and redeemed in light. One such night, as the moon reached its highest point, Lucien stopped beside the old willow. "Do you ever wonder," he asked, "what would have happened if I hadn't found you at the grave?" Ava smiled faintly. "Then the moon would have found another way. She always does." He turned to her. "Do you think she knew?" "She's the moon," Ava said. "She knows every promise we try to hide." He laughed softly, the sound low and unguarded. "Then she must know how much I love you." "She does," Ava replied, stepping closer. "She's written it in every silver beam." He kissed her, slow and sure. Around them, the wolves lifted their heads and howled, not in sorrow, not in war, but in reverence. The sound rose into the sky and merged with the stars, a hymn older than language. Later, when the pack quieted and the world seemed to tilt toward sleep, Ava leaned against Lucien's chest, watching the moonlight play across his face. "Do you ever think about destiny?" she asked. He considered. I used to think it was a cage. And now? Now I think it's a door. And you opened it, she smiled, brushing a hand across his jaw. Then promise me one thing. Anything. When the time comes for legends to fade and memories to turn to dust, promise you'll still find me, wherever the moon hangs. Lucien's eyes softened. He lifted her hand, kissing her knuckles. I kept one promise to your mother. I kept another to you. I think the moon will let me keep this one too. They stood there as the moon began to sink, their silhouettes one shape against the silver horizon. The forest hummed, alive with peace. Above them, the stars slowly dimmed into dawn. Years would pass. Songs would be sung of the king who fell for the moon and the queen who rose with her light. Children would whisper their story at fire pits, and lovers would vow beneath the same stars. Some would say the pair vanished into legend. Others swore that on certain nights, when the air was still and the world held its breath, two wolves, one black, one white, could be seen running side by side along the ridge, their eyes glowing gold and silver. Their laughter carried on the wind, but for Ava and Lucien there was no need for legend. There was only this, the feel of each other's heartbeat, the promise sealed in every dawn, and the knowledge that love, once found, never truly ends. The moon rose full once more, flooding the forest with argent light. Ava turned to Lucien, her voice soft but sure. Some promises don't end in death, she said, smiling through tears. They begin with it. And the moon, ancient and eternal, bore silent witness as the Alpha King and his Omega Queen disappeared into the silver glow, bound not by fate alone, but by the promise beneath the moon. Omega found wolves guarding her mother's grave. The Alpha King was keeping his promise. If you enjoyed listening to this story, please hit the like button, share it with someone who'd love this, and subscribe to Nightbond Narratives. And don't forget to ring the bell, so you never miss what's coming next. Tell me in the comments below, which part of the world are you watching from? Which moment of the story touched you most? Creating these immersive tales takes time, love, and effort, especially in audio-visual form. If you notice any small ambiguity, please overlook it. I promise every moonlit moment was crafted with care. I hope you'll appreciate the heart behind every scene.